So I want to talk a little bit about Elizabeth Holmes, and I want to talk a little bit about Theranos and this ongoing case. I'm not going to go into the details of it. If you want to know the details of it, you can Google it, you can YouTube it. There's loads of publications about what went on. There's a movie about it. There's a book called Bad Blood, which was written about it. So there's loads and loads of literature which you can go and digest in order to get the information you need. But really, I just wanted to give you my own thoughts and from my own perspective of the way that I see the world, and really as I was reflecting on what I'd read about this woman and what the company had undergone, I just wanted to share with you some thoughts, and I hope you find them useful. So I firstly wanted to just say a statement that I wrote in my book that I'm currently writing, which is about lessons that I have learned up until age 30, which is that your talents can take you to places where your character is not ready for. And what I mean by this is that a lot of us tend to think and have the mindset, and I've been growing up in a world where we believe that if I become successful, all my problems are going to be solved. If I become rich, then all of a sudden I'm going to give to charity. If I get married, then I'm all of a sudden going to become confident again, right? Most of us have been lured into this illusion that success brings with it character. But the reality of life is no, it doesn't. And the reason why that is because success is based on a bunch of principles. Success, you have to do certain things in a certain way, and no matter whether you're a good person or a bad person, you will still be able to become successful. And this is part of the reason why Elizabeth Holmes was able to achieve success. Actually, she was able to convince people who are highly intelligent, people who are highly educated, people who are already successful themselves, right? She managed to convince all these various board members and company owners to invest, some of them 100 million, 200 million, I think it was like 50 million. Right? These are not dumb people. These are people who've achieved success in their own right. And she was able to achieve them. She was able to persuade them to invest huge amounts of money in something which wasn't actually real, as far as we can tell, or and certainly as far as it's been reported. And so, one of the things that I would encourage you, and is a lesson that you want to take away from this very case, is that if you are still under the illusion that when you become successful, then you will be a good person, when you make a lot of money, then you will give to charity, I can tell you that it doesn't happen like that, okay? Money simply amplifies who you are. In fact, money and power amplify what you already are. So what I mean by this is, if you take somebody who is poor and who doesn't give anything, like he doesn't give anything to charity, he doesn't go do anything related to charity, if you give that person £1 million, right, let's just say somehow they won £1 million because somebody put their name in a pot or something, and it was £1 million that came through, that person is not going to give to charity, right? If you won't give 5%, or let's say 10% to charity when you have a little bit, you're not going to give 10% of £1 million. That's £100,000. You're not going to give £100,000 away to charity, are you? So it has to be something which is within your character. It has to be something which is within your lifestyle. It has to be something which is who you are in order to engage in it. Because if you become successful, like so many people do, without figuring out what I call the 5 major questions, which are: who am I? What's my story? Where am I from? What can I do? And where am I going? If you cannot answer those 5 questions and you become successful, you're either going to become a dictator, you're going to become an evil person, you're going to manipulate people, you're going to lie, you're going to cheat, you're going to do all kinds of things because you have power. There's no one really to challenge you. You have enough money that you can buy anyone off and scare anyone, which is one of the tactics that successful people use. Right? So you have to understand that you want to really figure out who you are, what you stand for, what you're capable of, what you believe in, what your destiny is, why you're here, what is your purpose, because you want to use that as your anchor so that you don't get strayed away onto the dark, what I call the dark side of life. right? So that's the first thing I really wanted to share with you. But I think it's so important. So many of us just don't get this. I'm telling you that money will amplify. If you're a really, really, really good person naturally without a lot of money, if I give you lots of money, you're just simply going to do whatever you've been doing when you didn't have a lot of money. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I wrote down here as I was reflecting is really about systems and corruption. I was thinking about this, and I don't know whether you've noticed how much we're living in a world today where so many people are abusing power. There are so many people who are corrupt. And, a little while ago, I spent a lot of time answering the question, why is it that Africa is still poor? Why is there no electricity all over Africa and yet most of the world has electricity? Why is there no running water in Africa and yet there's running water across the rest of the globe, right? I wanted to try and understand what was happening. And I found out that there were all these major keys, there were these major reasons why Africa was the way it was. And one of the major contributors as to why Africa is still the way that it is corruption. Okay, and the problem that you've got with corruption in Africa is a systematic corruption. What I mean by this is everybody the corruption is all the way from the top to the bottom, which means that nobody, because everybody in some way is illicit in the corruption, it means that nobody will ever be a whistleblower. Nobody will ever speak the truth. Nobody will ever stand out and say this is not right. What we're doing isn't right, because all of a sudden that will expose everybody else in the system. And so it takes somebody who is brave, it takes somebody who is courageous to be able to break the system, because you have to remember that if you take it upon yourself to reveal everybody within a system, that means most of the time you can never go back into that area because you can never be trusted, right? We know what happens to whistleblowers. In fact, some whistleblowers are killed. They are put in prison because you've got a system. I talk about what I call the 6 fears, right? So the 6 fears, without me getting into loads of details, one of them is laws and principles. Another one is cycles and seasons, but one of those fears is systems. And most of us tend to get trapped by systems. We tend to get trapped by these systematic systems where we are rigidified in that we cannot really speak our truth. We cannot really be creative. We cannot really push to the limits of our potential, of our capacity, because we have to act and behave within a certain frame, within a certain system. Right, and part of it is, of course, human beings, we have a need to be accepted, we have a need to be liked, we have a need to fit in, and so as a result of that, most of us end up being pigeonholed and put in bars where we can never actually reveal the truth. A lot of people who end up being whistleblowers, or people who leave the pack, or people who end up living their truth, these individuals end up being isolated. Right? A lot of these individuals end up in a situation where the world actually thinks that they are the bad guys, right? And a lot of people actually end up in a situation, and I think you can relate to this, and a lot of us can, whether it be in a job where we've seen something isn't right, we've seen something is corrupt, something is off, and yet we can't do anything about it because there is nowhere for us to move. If we go and speak to the management are going to tell us to shut our mouth. And so what ends up happening is, for a lot of us, we feel trapped. We feel in this kind of cycle where we just can't get out of this situation. And a lot of us, a lot of people end up being bought out. A lot of people end up signing things which say you can't, we'll pay you money, but don't say anything about this. And so actually it stops a lot of people from speaking their truth. As I think about this right now, as I'm saying this, I think about the amount of women who've gone through domestic abuse, who've gone through rape, who've have been in abusive relationships, and that shame and guilt follows them their entire life because they've never been able to speak their truth. They've never been able to share with anyone what they went through and what they experienced. So I just think it's just something for you to think about. I don't know whether it makes any sense to you or it adds any value to you, but it's just something that I was thinking about, and I would encourage you to think about. The last thing that I wanted to share with you about this particular case that I was reflecting on is about how easily human beings can be manipulated, right? We had a situation with this Elizabeth Holmes case where this woman managed to manipulate, lie, and fool shareholders, investors, board members, and employees. And nobody saw that this woman was doing it, right? And so one of the things that I really want you to pay attention to with yourself is really start thinking about, stop idolizing people and start thinking that, I think, how to explain this? A lot of us think that we are protected from manipulation. We think that we're protected from being lied to. Many of us don't believe that malevolence exists. And because we don't believe that malevolence exists and we don't believe that we have the capacity for malevolence, what ends up happening is that we don't protect ourselves against it. And this is kind of a duality, because in one way, you have to recognize that you have the capacity for malevolence and then ensure that you never end up down that dark path, meaning that many of us, we think that if we had a lot of money, we would never turn into bad people, we would never be corrupt, we would never lie, we would never get into weird schemes. But yet, it is possible for somebody who has been a good person, who was brought up right, to be able to go down that path. Second thing is, of course, is that there are people out there who possess malevolence. There are people out there who will hurt us, who will, let me tell you something. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. I think it was yesterday it was yesterday. And one of the things that we were talking about is that we were talking about the fact that so many people do not realize that there are people out there who want to deliberately hurt you. And if they could hurt you, they will. In fact, I was sharing with this lady a story about a woman who I'd been speaking to who was married to a narcissist. And I was saying, one of the things that narcissists have, the mindset that they have, is that if you are weak enough to allow them to manipulate you, to lie to you, to coerce you, to be able to abuse you, then it's your fault. Because you're so weak that you've allowed them to do it. Therefore, you deserve the fact that they've allowed to step on you and manipulate you and lie to you and cheat you, right? And so what I would share with you is you have to recognize that there are people out there who will manipulate you, who are much more clever than you actually are yourself. And so you have to guard yourself against this. You need to put things in place to ensure, okay, hold on a minute. What is my too far for me? What are my boundaries? What are the signals that will alert me to know that I'm going down the wrong path, that I'm being manipulated? One of the things that I'm writing at the moment is I'm writing a book to my sisters. I have 3 sisters. And in that book, I call it Red Flags, Yellow Flags. And it's basically a book about what they should look out for when it comes to relationships and narcissists and abuse. And one of the things that I say in that book is, listen, girls, it isn't about you having boundaries and setting yourself certain flags and knowing what the flags are, that it means that everybody's a bad person or every guy's a bad guy and every guy's going to be a serial killer. It isn't about that. What it's about is understanding what is too far for you. What is the edge? What is the line that if somebody crossed, you would know clearly it has gone too far? Because in my research, what I have found is that a lot of women have never set for themselves boundaries about what is too far for them. About, if a man does this to me, then I will never then no matter how much I love them, no matter how much I want the relationship to work, I can never progress with it, right? A lot of women have never set that as a standard for themselves, and this is something that I wrote and I'm writing with in the book for my sisters. Understanding, and I want my sisters to understand. Listen, the fact that you have these red flags and yellow flags about, for example, a man, if he takes you out and he doesn't pay for the first day, that is a yellow flag, right? Of course, there are some people, based on the circumstances and whatever, that may not be able to pay for a first date. But in the majority of the time, the man should be paying for the first date. And you need to start thinking about this, because if that happens and then he turns up late and then he says one thing and then does something else, like, a collection of these should be ringing alarm bells to you. And so I guess what I want to try and articulate with this thought or this lesson that I was thinking about is, you've really got to realize that you're vulnerable. You've got to really realize that you're corruptible. You've got to really realize that you can miss some signs. You can miss some things and allow somebody in, and those people will violate and take advantage of you because you've allowed them in. And it's just something that I thought I would share with you and I want you to think about. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you. I don't know what you think about this case and what your thoughts are. You guys know I love to hear your thoughts, so comment below, send me a message. But apart from that, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found it useful. Bye for now.